The summer air over Riverside Amusement Park shimmered with warmth, laughter, and the sugary smell of funnel cakes drifting between the rides. Families moved like small, colorful waves beneath the towering Ferris wheel. Children tugged on parents' hands. Teenagers rushed toward roller coasters, and music from the carousel echoed gently across the plaza. It was the kind of place where nothing dark was supposed to exist, where worry dissolved into sunshine and the world felt safe. Officer Daniel Brooks walked beside his canine partner, Max, weaving calmly through the crowd. The German Shepherd's badge glinted on his harness as he moved with steady purpose, his nose occasionally lifting to taste the air. Daniel had worked this annual festival for 6 years now, and despite the constant motion and noise, it was always one of his favorite assignments. A place full of families, a place where no child should ever be afraid. Max usually enjoyed it too, his tail often wagging at the scent of cotton candy, or when toddlers pointed in excitement at the police doggy. But today, the dog's posture was different. Shoulders firm, neck stiff, eyes scanning with a heaviness that Daniel instantly recognized. Max wasn't just alert. He was watching. Daniel slowed his steps. "What is it, buddy?" he murmured, though he doubted he'd get an answer. Max's instincts were legendary in the department, so sharp that some joked he should have been the one wearing the uniform instead of Daniel. But even for Max, this tension was unusual. They had barely taken 10 more steps when Max abruptly stopped. No bark, no lunge, just a sudden, powerful stillness. Daniel followed Max's line of sight, past a couple pushing a stroller, past a teenager carrying a giant stuffed bear, past a group of retirees discussing mortgage rates and health insurance. And then he saw her, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9. Blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a pale pink t-shirt, slightly wrinkled, walking beside a woman who appeared calm, maybe too calm, guiding the child along by the wrist. Nothing about them looked dangerous, not at first glance, but Max didn't move. His ears leaned forward, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The girl lifted her hands slightly behind her back. Daniel almost missed it, a tiny twitch of the fingers, the kind that could easily be mistaken for a child fidgeting. But Max reacted immediately, his body tightening like a bowstring. And then she did it again. This time, Daniel caught it clearly. The girl formed a sharp, quick gesture, an L shape, right against the fabric of her shirt, hidden from everyone except someone watching closely. And Max was watching. The dog released a deep, low rumble that vibrated straight through Daniel's arm. Several people nearby turned their heads, startled by the sudden tension radiating from the normally friendly canine. Daniel's pulse edged upward. "Easy, Max," he whispered, though he already knew this wasn't nothing. Max didn't false alarm. Not after all the years of training. Not after all the rescues, the searches, the cases where his instincts had saved lives, and once nearly saved Daniel's own. The woman tugged the girl's wrist a little too firmly. The girl stumbled, caught herself, and then looked back. Her eyes were wide, glistening, not with the sparkle of excitement all around them, but with something else. Something that drained the color from Daniel's face. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Max took a step forward. Daniel tightened the leash. His voice didn't rise, but his heart did. Something about this moment pressed against an old scar inside him, the one tied to his past case, a child gone missing, a clue overlooked, a memory that never stopped replaying in the quiet hours of the night. He wasn't about to ignore another signal. The little girl's gaze flicked back one more time, right at Max, as if she knew he understood something no one else did. And in that fraction of a second, Daniel felt a strange certainty settle over him. This wasn't random. Kids don't send coded gestures in the middle of a theme park unless something is terribly wrong. Before he could move, a group of festival volunteers pushing equipment walked between them, briefly blocking his view. By the time they passed, the woman and the girl had disappeared deeper into the crowd. Max jerked forward, pulling hard. "All right," Daniel muttered under his breath, adrenaline rising. "We're following her." He let Max lead. But before diving into the thickening sea of people, Daniel glanced at the camera on the nearest pole,
the one mounted beside the park's welcome sign. Paws of Courage, the storytelling channel Daniel sometimes watched for its uplifting rescue stories, had a small booth nearby promoting safety awareness. The thought brushed his mind strangely, like a whisper of fate. "If someone ever tells this story," Daniel murmured, half under his breath, "I hope they remind people to follow channels that actually care about keeping families safe, like Paws of Courage." His voice carried no advertisement tone, just a quiet, honest plea in a moment that felt suddenly too real, too sharp. Stories like this, people need to hear them.
And then Max pulled again, harder this time. Daniel straightened. The festival lights still glittered, the music still played. But for Daniel, the world had narrowed to one truth. A little girl had called for help without speaking, and Max had heard her. "Lead the way, partner," Daniel whispered. Together, they plunged into the crowd.
The crowd parted in uneven ripples as Max guided Daniel deeper into Riverside Amusement Park. The cheerful music and clattering ride mechanisms faded beneath a growing thrum of tension. Daniel kept his hand steady on Max's harness, but his heartbeat had already shifted into a faster, heavier rhythm. The girl's silent gesture replayed in his mind, sharp and unmistakable. He had seen children send signals before, some subtle, some desperate, but never so quietly and never with such pleading eyes. He needed answers, and Max was already on the trail. They slipped past a cotton candy cart where an elderly couple chatted about rising medical insurance costs and how theme parks weren't this crowded back in the day. Further ahead, a young father filmed his kids on a spinning ride, unaware of the storm unfolding just 20 yards away. Everything looked normal. That was the problem. Danger often hid behind normal. Daniel had learned that the hard way. Max pulled left, then paused, sniffing the warm air. Daniel recognized that stance. The dog wasn't just following a scent, he was analyzing, thinking, choosing a direction. "Talk to me, buddy," Daniel whispered. It wasn't a command, it was trust. Max's ears perked, then he moved with new certainty toward a shaded walkway lined with carnival game booths. Daniel followed closely, one hand resting at his belt, scanning faces. Years on the force had sharpened his instincts, but the case that changed everything happened long before Max. A missing girl, a grocery store parking lot, a mother's scream, a trail that went cold too fast. Even now, her photograph sometimes flashed into his mind when he closed his eyes, and today's frightened little girl had stirred that old ache. He exhaled, steadying himself. Not again. Not on my watch. As they moved forward, a festival worker named Glenn, an older man with sun-toughened skin and a badge that read Event Safety Coordinator, stepped out from behind a booth. "Officer Brooks?" Glenn called. "You looking for someone?" His tone held a hint of concern. Daniel slowed but didn't halt Max's momentum. "You see a woman pulling a little girl through here? Blonde kid, pink shirt?" Glenn nodded slowly. "Yeah, they were moving quick. Thought maybe they were late for a show or something." Then he frowned. "The woman wouldn't look me in the eye, and the girl, well, she looked like she wanted to, but didn't." Daniel's chest tightened. "Which way?" "Toward the arcade tent," Glenn said, pointing. Max tugged in the same direction, confirming it. "Thanks," Daniel said, already moving past him. Glenn hesitated. "Everything all right, officer?" Daniel didn't turn back. "I hope so." They followed the path into a narrower part of the park, where noises bounced strangely off the tarp walls. Max's nails clicked sharply against the pavement, each sound echoing Daniel's rising urgency. The deeper they went, the more Daniel felt that old instinct flickering awake, the one he tried to bury but never really could. Every detail jumped out at him. A stuffed animal abandoned on a bench, a stroller parked without a parent in sight, a group of teenagers blocking an exit as they argued about who owed money for a video game booth. Chaos and innocence mixed together, making it harder to see the shadows. But Max didn't waver. They reached the entrance of the arcade tent just as Max jerked to a halt again. His head angled sharply toward the back of the tent where dozens of claw machines, racing simulators, and flashing neon lights created a dizzying blur of colors. Inside, laughter blended with digital beeps and the clatter of coins. Somewhere among all that noise was the girl. Daniel crouched slightly, resting a hand behind Max's harness. "Find her," he said softly. Max surged forward. The dog maneuvered through the maze of machines with startling precision. Daniel weaved behind him, heart accelerating with every step. The tent grew louder, brighter, more chaotic, but Max was laser-focused, ignoring everything except the invisible thread pulling him onward. Then abruptly, the dog stopped beside a row of coin pushers. A small pink bracelet lay on the ground. Daniel knelt and picked it up. It was cheap plastic, decorated with tiny hearts, the kind sold at souvenir carts all over the park. But this one was stretched slightly, like it had been pulled from a wrist too quickly. A few strands of blonde hair clung to the clasp. Max sniffed it once, twice, then looked up at Daniel with a low, urgent whine. "She was here," Daniel murmured. But the girl and the woman were gone again. Just like that. Daniel stood, scanning exits, only 2 ways out of the arcade tent. But which one? Max lifted his nose, chest expanding as he drew in the air slowly, methodically. Daniel held still, letting the dog think. After a long moment, Max turned sharply toward the left exit. And then the dog's posture changed. Not alert, not curious. Driven. Daniel felt the shift like a bolt of electricity through the leash. "All right, I trust you. Lead on." As Max lunged toward the exit, Daniel followed, unaware that with every step the shadow hanging over the girl was growing darker, and that the next signal she sent would be far more desperate than the last.
Max pulled Daniel out of the arcade tent with a force that surprised even him. The afternoon sun hit them again, bright and hot, but neither of them slowed. The bracelet Daniel had found still pressed against his palm, a reminder that the little girl had passed through here just moments ago, and now every second mattered. They followed a winding walkway lined with food stalls and game booths. The smells of kettle corn, grilled onions, and lemonade mixed with the humid air, but Max ignored all of it. His body stayed tight, focused, ears pinned forward. Whatever trail he was following, it wasn't scent alone. The dog was reading the environment, the movement, the tension, something only the best canines in the country could do. Ahead, the crowd thickened near the entrance to the park's Hall of Reflections, a massive funhouse made of glass walls and trick mirrors. It was a confusing place even for adults, full of distorted reflections and dead-end hallways. For a frightened child, it could feel like a labyrinth. Daniel felt the hairs on his neck rise. The woman was hiding, or stalling, or preparing something worse. Max guided Daniel to the funhouse entrance just as a ticket attendant stepped away from the line ropes, waving to someone. Daniel flashed his badge. "Officer Brooks," he said quickly. "Did a woman come through here with a little girl? Blonde kid, pink shirt?" The attendant blinked, surprised. "Oh, yes, about 5, maybe 10 minutes ago." The woman bought 2 FastPass wristbands even though there was no line, kept her head down. The little girl looked like she wanted to say something, but the woman kept pulling her. Daniel nodded once. "Thank you." Max growled softly, not at the attendant, but toward the dark interior of the funhouse. The dog stepped inside, and the world changed. The cool air smelled faintly of cleaning solution and metal. Rows of mirrors multiplied Daniel and Max into dozens of reflections, some stretched tall,
some squished wide, some bending light in unsettling ways. Voices from outside muffled instantly as the winding hall swallowed them. Daniel tightened his grip on Max's harness. "Stay close, buddy. She could be anywhere." They followed a winding walkway, turning left into another. Their reflections multiplied again, making it hard to separate real from illusion. Daniel scanned each face, each flicker of movement, reminding himself that criminals favored confusion. They thrived in environments that masked their intent. A small shadow flicked across the floor. Max froze. Daniel's pulse spiked. "What do you see?" Max stepped toward a mirror on the right, but not the reflection. He pressed his nose to the edge of the frame where a faint smudge of pink streaked the glass. Daniel leaned closer. It was subtle, almost invisible. A fingerprint. Small, likely a child's. He swallowed hard. She came through here. They turned another corner. The hall tightened, the reflection shifting from playful distortions into something more eerie. The Funhouse soundtrack, gentle chimes meant to amuse children, echoed ominously through the twisting pathways. And then Daniel saw it. A flash of movement. Not a reflection, not a trick of the light. A small hand. It appeared briefly in a mirror ahead, open, then closing into a fist, then open again. 3 times. Deliberate. Rhythmic. Daniel's breath caught. That's the signal. That's the same pattern. Max barked. Not loud, but sharp and decisive, like a command for attention. The hand vanished. Daniel pushed forward, weaving through the mirror maze with urgency. When they reached the corner, the girl and the woman were already far down another mirrored corridor. The girl turned her head just once, and Daniel saw her eyes clearly this time, red from crying, brimming with panic. She raised her hand again, but the woman jerked her forward, and the gesture stopped mid-air. Max growled deeper this time. Daniel stepped into the narrow passage, picking up speed. But the funhouse suddenly erupted with a new noise. Something sharp, metallic. A crash. A scream. Then silence. Families ahead backed away, confused and unsettled. A middle-aged man holding a world's best grandpa hat turned to Daniel. "I think something's wrong in there. She dragged the kid too hard, hit one of the mirrors maybe." Daniel didn't wait to ask more. He pushed deeper into the corridor, Max pulling like a force of nature. Glass reflected their movements from every angle as they rounded the final bend into a small open chamber lined with perfect mirrors. And that's when Daniel saw it. On the glossy floor lay a small plastic charm, the kind that clips onto a child's backpack or shoe. A tiny dolphin, sky blue, cracked down the middle from impact. A piece of the girl's belongings, abandoned in a rush. Max sniffed it once, then lifted his head abruptly, body rigid. Daniel whispered, "Which way?" Max looked toward the emergency exit door at the edge of the chamber, just slightly ajar, the metal frame still vibrating from recent movement. She had fled, through the emergency passage. Daniel stepped toward the door, but just as he reached it, a small voice echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the mirrors, a soft, quivering whisper. "Help!" Daniel froze. Max's ears snapped upright. The whisper came again, almost swallowed by the maze. "Please, help!" Not the girl. A different voice. Smaller. Weaker. Daniel's blood ran cold. There was another child in the funhouse. Or worse. Someone else the woman had passed. Someone she had left behind. He exchanged a glance with Max. The dog didn't need a command. They pushed through the emergency door together, into the unknown. The emergency door swung shut behind Daniel with a metallic thud, sealing off the echoing corridors of the mirror maze. The sudden shift from neon light to the dim backstage passageway made his eyes adjust slowly. The air here felt cooler, stale, carrying a faint scent of dust and old machinery. Max moved ahead with quiet urgency, sniffing the concrete floor, tail stiff, body angled forward like a drawn arrow. Somewhere behind the walls, rides hummed and festival music thumped faintly. But in this narrow service corridor, the world felt eerily distant, and that soft, trembling whisper Daniel had heard still clung to the back of his mind. "Help!" Not the blonde girl, not the woman. Another child, or someone trying very hard to sound like one. Daniel's pulse tightened. He had been a cop long enough to know that predators sometimes used misdirection, sounds, cries, distractions to pull attention away from victims. He also knew that fear could make a child sound much younger than they were. But whatever the source of that voice, it meant one thing. The danger here was larger than he first thought. Max suddenly stopped at an intersection in the corridor, nose pressed to the floor. Daniel knelt, fingers brushing a faint scuff mark, small, like a shoe dragging. A few feet away, a partial print smudged in dust, a child's footprint, fresh. He looked at Max. She came through here. Max gave a short, low whine, the kind Daniel had learned meant yes and more. They moved left, following the faint trail until it led to a maintenance door hanging slightly ajar. A thin beam of light leaked through the crack. Max stared at it intently, muscles taut. Daniel pushed the door open. It led into a cramped storage area filled with cleaning supplies, broken props, and cardboard boxes. The room smelled of plastic and cold metal. In the far corner, behind a stack of old carnival decorations, came another whisper. Don't let her see me." Daniel's breath caught. He stepped forward slowly, palms open. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm with the police. You're safe." Max moved beside him, posture gentle but alert. A tiny figure shifted behind the boxes, a little boy, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a superhero t-shirt 2 sizes too big. His cheeks were streaked with tears, his hair messy, his small hands trembling as he clutched a ripped paper wristband. Daniel knelt. "Hey there, buddy. What's your name?" He didn't answer. He kept glancing toward the door behind them, as if expecting someone terrible to burst through at any second. Max lowered his head and nudged his nose gently toward the boy's knee. The child's breathing slowed just a little. Finally, he whispered, She told me to stay quiet." Daniel's stomach clenched. "The woman you were with?" He shook his head quickly. "Not her. The tall man. The one with the hat. He said I'd get in trouble if I said anything. He said she was taking me to the boat, but..." He stopped, choking on the last words. Daniel didn't push. "You're safe now. Max and I won't let anyone hurt you." Max nudged the boy again, this time placing himself between the child and the doorway, as if already guarding him from whatever fear lived in that memory. But Daniel's mind spun. Tall man, hat, boat. This confirmed it. This wasn't a simple case of a woman acting alone. There were multiple people involved, likely using the amusement park to move children without suspicion. The blonde girl wasn't the only target, and the woman wasn't necessarily the mastermind. She might even be desperate. The boy slowly stood, still clutching Max's fur like a lifeline. "The boat leaves at 6, he whispered. "He said she had to bring me. But then she left me here. She was scared too."
A chill coursed through Daniel. "Do you know where they were going?" The boy shook his head, then reached into his oversized shirt pocket and pulled out something crumpled, a glossy ticket stub. Daniel took it carefully. It was for a ferry dock miles away from the park. Time. They were up against time. Before Daniel could reassure him, Max's head snapped up, his ears pinned sharply. A low growl rolled through his chest like distant thunder. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Coming fast. Daniel rose silently and placed a finger to his lips for the boy. He tucked the child gently behind a stack of boxes and whispered, "Stay here. Don't move until I come back." Max moved beside the door, body angled, ready. The footsteps grew louder, closer, more urgent. A shadow stretched across the hallway floor through the slit of light under the door. Tall, long-legged, unmistakably adult. The boy whimpered softly, and Max's growl deepened. Daniel's heartbeat hammered against his ribs. The doorknob rattled, once, then again, harder. Whoever was on the other side wasn't casually checking a door. They were searching, hunting. Daniel positioned himself beside the hinged side of the doorway, hand hovering near his holster, but not drawing. It wasn't time for that. Not yet. The doorknob rattled a third time. Then silence. For a moment, Daniel thought the person had moved on, but Max didn't relax. His body stayed coiled, as if reading a danger Daniel could not yet see. And then, a whisper seeped under the door. Low, male, impatient. Where the hell did she take them? Daniel felt the air tighten. Them. Plural. Whoever this was, he wasn't just looking for the little girl. He was looking for the boy, too, and maybe others. The shadow paused. Then the footsteps retreated down the corridor. Only when the sound faded into nothing did Max's stance ease, not fully. He kept his gaze locked on the door like the threat still lingered. Daniel crouched again beside the child. "Did you hear that voice before?" he whispered. The boy nodded immediately, tears spilling again. "That's him. That's the man with the hat." Daniel exhaled, cold and controlled. "He won't get near you again. I promise." He stood and scanned the room, searching for the next path. He couldn't stay hidden here, not with the girl still out there, possibly terrified, possibly sending another silent signal, and not with a predator roaming the maintenance corridors. He gently took the boy's hand. "We're getting you to security. Then Max and I are going after her." The boy looked up, voice trembling with hope. "The girl? Will she be okay?" Daniel squeezed his hand. "She sent a signal once. She'll do it again." Max barked softly, affirming, urgent, ready. Together, they slipped back into the corridor, moving fast. A child had been left behind, but another child was still lost. And this time, Daniel swore he wouldn't be too late.
Daniel moved quickly through the service corridor, Max beside him, and the little boy's small hand tucked safely in his own. They emerged into a brighter loading area behind the funhouse, where staff members wheeled crates of supplies toward the festival grounds. The noise of the park rushed back around them, children cheering, games buzzing, the pop of a distant fireworks test. For a heartbeat, it felt normal again. But nothing about this day was normal. Daniel spotted a pair of uniformed security guards and waved them over urgently. One of them, a young woman named Harper, immediately crouched to eye level with the boy. "Hey, sweetheart," she said gently. "You're okay now. We've got you." The boy clung to Max for a moment longer before Harper lifted him into her arms, promising to take him somewhere safe. He gave Max one last grateful pat before being carried toward the staff office. As soon as the child was out of sight, Max pressed forward, nose to the ground. Daniel followed without hesitation. He didn't need to guess where they were going. Max's instincts were pulling them toward the heart of the park, where the music grew louder and the crowd denser. Daniel kept scanning faces, searching for the blonde girl's frightened eyes or the woman's rigid posture. He replayed the boy's words as his boots hit the pavement. The tall man, the boat, 6 o'clock. This wasn't just a panicked woman dragging a child away for personal reasons. There was a system, a plan, a structure, someone higher up, someone giving orders. And if the woman was acting under pressure, she might be trying to get the girl out before someone else intervened. "Max," Daniel murmured, "find her." The dog lifted his head, scenting the air, and suddenly veered left toward the central plaza. A wave of park visitors crossed their path, families holding drinks, teenagers waving tickets, parents debating whether to buy funnel cakes now or later. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, like a cheerful mask hiding something rotten underneath. Max sped up. He stopped near the entrance to the Sky Swing Tower, one of the tallest rides in the park. The lines snaked around metal barricades, full of people laughing and wiping sweat from their brows. At first, Daniel didn't see anything unusual. Then he noticed a small cluster of guests staring toward the far side of the queue, whispering, pointing. Max growled. He followed their line of sight. The woman stood near the loading gate, clutching the blonde girl's wrist so tightly that the girl's knuckles had turned white. The woman's face was flushed, tense, her eyes scanning anxiously as if expecting someone to appear from the crowd. And the girl wasn't just scared. She was pleading. She lifted her hand subtly, pressing her thumb and 2 fingers together, then opening them again in a precise flicking motion. 3 times. A silent call for help, clear as day to anyone trained or any canine who could read distress like a second language. Max barked, sharp and commanding. Guests jumped, turning toward the sound. Others whispered, "Is that a police dog? What's going on?" The woman flinched at the bark. She jerked the girl closer, putting herself between Daniel and the child, her eyes flicking toward the emergency stairs beside the ride. She was going to run. Daniel stepped forward. "Ma'am," he called steadily, "Riverside Police. I need you to stop right there." The woman's eyes widened, not with guilt, but with desperation. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "No," she mouthed. "They're watching." Daniel slowed his approach, hands open. "We need to talk. You are not in trouble if you cooperate, but you need to let the girl go." Max stood tall beside him, muscles tight, gaze burning into the woman with unwavering focus. For a moment, it seemed like she might surrender. Then a commotion erupted behind Daniel. 2 teenagers bumped into a trash can, knocking it over. The bang echoed across the plaza, startling the crowd. And it was all the woman needed. She bolted. Dragging the child behind her, she darted toward the side exit of the Skyswing platform. Max lunged at once, barking fiercely, the sound slicing through the ambient music and chatter. Daniel sprinted after them. The woman shoved past people, weaving through strollers and ride attendants. Someone shouted, "Hey, watch it!" Another yelled, "What's going on?" Phones came up, people recorded. The situation had become a spectacle, a ripple of tension spreading through the visitors. Max closed the distance fast, his paws pounding against the ground. Daniel kept pace as best he could, sweat trickling down his neck. The woman didn't slow until she reached the base of the Skylift cable cars, a gentle overhead transport ride that floated guests from one end of the park to the other. A line of bright gondolas hung suspended above, moving slowly along the cable track. She shoved the operator aside and tried to force open the loading gate. "Stop!" Daniel shouted. The woman grabbed the girl and pulled her into the nearest gondola cabin just as the automatic doors began to slide shut. The operator scrambled to hit the emergency switch, but he missed. The cabin locked and began to rise. Daniel skidded to a halt as Max barked furiously at the ascending gondola. The woman looked down through the glass, eyes wide with panic, mouthing something Daniel couldn't hear. But the girl pressed both palms against the glass, then formed another silent signal, a triangle with her fingers. Danger. Extreme danger. The cabin lifted higher, moving across the park. Daniel stared up, breath tightening. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was a countdown. "Max," Daniel said quietly, "we're not losing her."
The dogs stood braced, gaze locked on the rising gondola. And far above them, the girl looked down, her face pale, her lips trembling, praying someone would understand.
For a few long seconds, the world seemed to slow around Daniel. The gondola cabin carrying the woman and the blonde girl rose steadily on the cable, the glass reflecting afternoon sunlight as it drifted out over the park. The girl's fingers were still shaped in that small triangle on the window, her silent signal hanging in the air like a scream no one else could hear. No one except Max. The German Shepherd's reaction was instant. His body snapped forward, front paws lifting off the ground as he lunged toward the rising cabin. A deep, powerful bark burst from his chest, echoing across the plaza like a warning siren. People in line jumped, some stumbling back from the railing, while others craned their necks to see what had triggered the dog so suddenly. "Whoa, easy!" the skylift operator shouted, startled. "What's going on?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the cabin as it climbed higher, the girl's pale face shrinking against the bright sky. He watched her draw the triangle one more time, pressing her fingertips to the glass with desperate precision. Max barked again at the exact same moment, then let out a piercing whine, pacing in a tight, frantic line. A murmur rolled through the crowd. "Did you see that? The kid's doing something with her hands. The dog's reacting to her. He knows her." Somewhere off to the side, a woman in a sun hat lifted her phone higher and hit the Go Live button. "I think something serious is happening," she whispered to her unseen audience. "That police dog is going crazy. Look at the little girl up there." Daniel stepped to the operator's console. "Shut it down," he ordered firmly. "Now." The young operator, a nervous kid barely out of high school, swallowed hard and hit the emergency slow switch. The hum of the machinery changed pitch, and the line of gondolas shuddered as their speed dropped. They didn't stop completely. That would require a manual override in the control room, but they crawled now instead of gliding. "I can't freeze them here," the operator stammered. "Safety protocols only let me slow them down from this panel. Full stop has to be done from the main control tower on the other end." "Call it," Daniel said. "Right now. Tell them we've got a possible abduction in progress." The operator fumbled for the intercom mic, voice shaking as he relayed the message. A few yards away, Glenn, the event safety coordinator, pushed his way through the forming circle of onlookers. "Brooks," Glenn said, slightly out of breath, "what have you got?" Daniel pointed upward. "She's not that girl's mother. The kid's been sending distress signals. Max picked it up before any of us did. And there's at least one other suspect in play. A tall man, probably tied to a larger operation. We can't let that cabin reach the far side without eyes on them." Glenn followed Daniel's gesture, squinting at the slowly moving gondola. Below, the crowd thickened, drawn by the sight of a police officer, a canine straining on his leash, and a child in the air pressing her hands to the glass. "Do you have proof?" someone in the line called out, voice edged with skepticism. "Maybe it's just a family argument." Before Daniel could answer, the girl moved again. This time, she placed one hand flat on the glass and traced a shaking line across her throat, then pointed directly down at Max. The dog exploded in a furious bark, lunging so hard that Daniel had to brace his legs to hold him back. Max's eyes never left the girl, his body trembling with urgency. Guests around them drew in sharp breaths. A man in a baseball cap muttered, "That's not just a tantrum, that kid's terrified." The woman in the cabin grabbed the girl and yanked her away from the window, her mouth forming words that didn't reach the ground. But even from below, Daniel could see the wild panic in the woman's eyes. "It's real," Daniel said quietly. "Max isn't guessing, he's responding. She's communicating with him." The live-streaming woman whispered, more to her phone than to anyone else, "If you're watching this on Whispering Hearts later, this is what it looks like when a dog understands a child better than any adult in sight." Glenn exhaled slowly. "What do you need from us?" "I need a way up there,"
and I need access to the main control room. Someone has to slow that line even more, maybe stall it near a platform. If they reach the far side and bolt, we'll lose them in the crowd." As if on cue, a young man in a grease-smudged maintenance shirt jogged over. His name tag read, "Riley, Ride Tech." "I heard the call. We can't full stop the skylift with passengers mid-span unless it's a mechanical failure, but I can drop the speed again from the tower and keep your car trailing theirs as close as I can. Gives you a shot to reach them. You good with heights?" Daniel glanced up at the thin cables cutting across the sky. "I'll manage." Max let out another low growl, pulling toward the loading gate as if he understood the plan. The girl's cabin drifted slowly along the line now, still rising toward the high point of the park. The woman inside kept looking down, one hand on the girl's shoulder, the other clutching her bag so tight her fingers looked bloodless. Daniel looked at Glenn. "Clear this area. Keep people back. If anyone here sees a tall man in a dark hat watching that gondola more than the others, I want security on him immediately." Glenn nodded and began barking orders to the guards. "Everyone step back from the railing, please. Give the officer room. This is a police matter now." The crowd shifted reluctantly, curiosity battling with caution. Phones stayed raised, a sea of glowing screens capturing every move. Somewhere a child asked, "Mom, is that girl okay?" The mother whispered, "I hope so," without taking her eyes off the sky. Riley pointed toward the next empty cabin sliding into the loading bay. "That one's clear. I can lock you and the dog in, ride tech mode. I'll radio ahead to the tower and keep your car trailing theirs as close as I can. You're not supposed to move between cabins up there, but..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Daniel clipped Max's leash to the front ring of the harness, tightening it just a notch. "You ready, partner?" Max looked up at him, amber eyes steady, then back to the girl's cabin above. His tail didn't wag, he simply planted his paws and waited for the gate to open. Daniel stepped toward the loading platform, feeling every year of his service settle onto his shoulders. He had spent a career trying to make sure no other child slipped through the cracks like the one from his past, the one he'd never been fast enough to save. This time, there was a dog beside him who had seen what no one else had. This time, a little girl had sent her SOS straight to four paws and a beating heart. And a whole crowd had just watched that dog answer. "Let us up," Daniel told Riley. The gate swung open. Together, man and dog stepped into the waiting cabin, rising slowly toward a confrontation that would decide whether that silent signal from a child in the sky would be the start of her story or the end of it.
The gondola door clicked shut behind Daniel and Max, sealing them in a small glass cabin that immediately began to rise. The slow hum of the skylift machinery vibrated through the metal floor, and the world below shrank with each passing second. The wind shifted around them, brushing against the glass, carrying faint sounds from the park. Laughter, music, the chatter of families who had no idea a crisis was unfolding above their heads. Daniel steadied his breath. He wasn't afraid of heights, not really, but being suspended this high while a terrified child dangled ahead in another moving cabin set his nerves on edge. Max paced twice in the tight space, then planted himself at the front window, staring intently at the gondola containing the woman and the blonde girl. They were 3 cabins ahead now, their silhouettes small against the bright summer sky. The girl's posture was tight, shoulders hunched, head ducked slightly as if she were trying to shrink into herself. The woman kept one hand gripping the support rail, the other holding her bag as though it contained something she couldn't risk losing for even a second. Riley's voice crackled through the small speaker above Daniel's head. "Officer Brooks, I've slowed your line again. You'll coast closer to their cabin as you approach the apex. After that, gravity does most of the work." "Understood," Daniel said. Max growled softly, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. His ears flicked back, then forward again, reading something Daniel couldn't yet see. Ahead, the girl shifted closer to the window.
Her small fingers traced something on the glass, pressing softly, her motions tiny and secretive. Daniel leaned forward. "Come on," he whispered. "Show me." For a moment, she hesitated. Then she raised 2 fingers and tapped them rapidly. Twice, then 3 times. Max barked so sharply that it echoed inside the glass cabin, startling even Daniel. "It's her again," Daniel murmured. "She's signaling. Same rhythm." Max barked once more, ears pinned forward in pure focus. The woman noticed this time. She spun toward the girl, gripping her arm roughly. A flash of anger and maybe fear crossed her face. Even from several cabins away, Daniel could see her lips moving rapidly, scolding, warning, threatening. The girl's head bowed, but her eyes stayed locked on Max, and her fingers pressed one last frantic gesture against the glass. "Help." Daniel swallowed hard. "We're coming, kid. Just hold on." The gondola jerked slightly as they neared the top of the line, where the ride transitioned into its slowest point. They now hovered nearly parallel with the woman's cabin, only one empty gondola between them. Daniel could see her more clearly now. Sweat matted her hair to her forehead, and her eyes darted constantly between the girl and the far side of the park, where the disembarkation station waited like an exit she desperately needed. But behind that panic was something else, something hollow and haunted. Guilt. Not the cold kind criminals wore, the cracking kind, the kind that suggested she was trapped too. Daniel took a breath, steady and deliberate. "Max, stay ready." Max didn't blink. Riley's voice returned over the speaker. "Officer, I've slowed your line again. You'll coast closer to their cabin as you approach the apex. After that, gravity does most of the work." 90 seconds. Daniel's pulse ticked upward. In that short window, he needed to get the woman's attention, calm her if possible, confront her if necessary, and create an opening for the girl to escape. He stepped toward the side window and raised a hand to catch the woman's eye. She didn't react at first. The girl did. Her bright eyes widened with fear and relief all at once. Then slowly the woman turned. Her expression shifted. Recognition, then disbelief, then dread. She mouthed something Daniel couldn't hear. Max barked loudly, his voice carrying across the space between cabins. The woman flinched. Daniel raised both hands to show calm, speaking loud enough to carry through the air. "Ma'am, you don't have to run anymore. You're surrounded. This ends safely if you let the girl step away from you." The woman shook her head vigorously. Her fingers tightened around the girl's wrist until the child winced. "No," she shouted back, her voice breaking across the distance. "You don't understand. He'll kill us both if I stop." Daniel's blood chilled. He shouted, "Who? Who's waiting for you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed downward toward the far side of the park, toward the docks stretching along the glittering river, the same direction the boy had mentioned earlier. The boat. Daniel's jaw tightened. The organization is real. She's not the mastermind. She's a pawn. And the child is bait. Cargo, whatever word these monsters used. "Ma'am, listen," Daniel yelled. "We already secured one of the children you were supposed to deliver. The man isn't here. You hear me? He's not watching. We found the boy." Her entire body froze. The girl looked up at her in confusion. Daniel continued, voice steady but urgent. "He's safe. He's with security. If that man threatened you, he won't get to you today. Let the girl go. You can walk away from him. This is your chance." The woman's face crumpled, fear and relief fighting simultaneously. Max let out a soft, pleading whine, and that, more than anything, seemed to break her. She reached toward the gondola door as if to open it, but the girl jerked suddenly, pointing behind the woman with wide eyes. Daniel followed the girl's gaze, and his stomach dropped. At the far disembarkation station, barely visible from this height, stood a tall man in a dark hat, watching the girl's gondola, waiting. Daniel's breath hardened. "Max, he's here." The shepherd barked, sharp and furious. Below, the man lifted something to his ear, talking into a phone. The woman saw him too. Pure terror washed over her face. She grabbed the emergency latch inside her gondola cabin, and the entire cabin lurched violently. Guests below screamed. Daniel's cabin rocked. Max braced his paws. The woman wasn't trying to flee anymore. She was trying to break the mechanism, trying to stop the ride, even if it meant snapping the cable, even if it meant falling. The girl screamed, a sound Daniel heard even through the roar of wind. Daniel slammed his palm against the glass. "Stop! Don't do it! You'll kill her!" The woman looked at him, eyes drenched in a desperate, hopeless plea. "He said if I failed, he'd take my daughter next." Her voice cracked. "She's only 5. Max barked again, frantic, as if telling her he understood. The cable groaned loudly, metal grinding under strain. Daniel's time had run out. He grabbed the emergency override bar inside his cabin and prepared to do something incredibly dangerous, something that might save the little girl or cost him everything.
Daniel wrapped his fingers around the red emergency bar inside his cabin and felt the vibration of the moving line all the way up his arm. The metal was warm from the sun and the constant motion, humming with the weight of every family gliding peacefully below. Except one. The one 3 cabins ahead, where a woman on the edge and a child in terror hung between sky and ground. "Riley," Daniel called into the small ceiling speaker, "I'm going to override my door." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Officer, if you open that up here, the system will read it as a failure. It could lock the whole line, and you could get thrown if we get a wind gust." "I don't have a choice," Daniel said quietly. "She's about to tear the guts out of that latch. If she snaps anything, nobody walks away from this." Max stood braced at the glass, his body swaying with the gentle rocking of the cabin, eyes fixed on the girl ahead. He gave a low, anxious whine, flicking his gaze back at Daniel as if to say, "Hurry." Daniel met his eyes. "You stay with me, partner. Whatever happens, you stay." He pulled the bar. An alarm shrieked inside the cabin, shrill and immediate. The gondola jolted hard, swinging in a wide arc that knocked Daniel sideways and sent his stomach lurching. Max spread his paws and rode the swing like he'd done it 100 times, but a startled bark still burst from him as the ride shuddered. Down below, people screamed as the entire line of cabins lurched, then slowed, then froze in place. The skylift had stopped. "Brooks!" Riley's voice cracked through the speaker, strained and high. "You just triggered a full lock. The system thinks your door is compromised. Everything's locked and fail-safe. You've got no more than 10 minutes before we have to start a manual evac with ladders and harnesses." "Then we better use those 10 minutes, Daniel answered, gripping the door handle as the cabin rocked itself back toward center. "Can you get a maintenance team up the support tower near my position?" "I'm on my way. You're almost even with Tower 2. We've got a walkway there." A pause, then softer. "Just don't fall, okay? I really don't want to explain that paperwork." The line went silent. Daniel drew a breath, then cracked the cabin door an inch. Wind rushed in, cooler up here, carrying the tang of river water and hot metal. He eased the door open wider until he could lean out just enough to see ahead. Their cabin now hung almost parallel with the woman's, separated by one unmoving gondola between them. The girl's face pressed to the glass, eyes wide, cheeks wet. The woman clung to the central pole, knuckles white, her other hand still near the emergency latch but no longer yanking at it. The sudden stop had scared her too. Max pushed his head toward the gap of open air, sniffing, then barked once, loud, sharp, direct. The girl turned her head toward the sound. Daniel cupped his hands around his mouth. "Ma'am, it's over. The ride shut down. Look down." She did. Far below, the once scattered crowd had coalesced into a dense ring of faces staring upward. Near the far station, security uniforms and park staff clustered around the disembark ramp.
The tall man in the dark hat stood out like a stain, his stance rigid, his head tilted in their direction. 2 security guards had moved closer to him. He hadn't noticed yet. "Do you see him?" Daniel called. "He's not in control anymore. We are. You don't have to do what he says." The woman blinked hard, tears spilling. Her gaze swung between the man on the ground, the locked station, the cabin around her, and the girl at her side. "My little girl," she shouted back, voice cracking against the wind. "He sent me a picture of her school, her bus stop. He said if I didn't bring this one to the boat, he'd take mine instead. What was I supposed to do?" Daniel leaned out further, one hand still locked on the doorframe. "You were supposed to stay alive long enough for someone to help you. That's what you're going to do right now. You have a choice this time." Max gave another bark, not angry now, but urgent. He sat at the open doorway, his body a wall between Daniel and the drop, as if he understood that one wrong slip could send his partner over the edge. The girl lifted her hand again. Slowly, carefully, she pressed her fingers to the glass in that same small triangle, then pointed at the woman's clenched fist. "She's telling you," Daniel called, "she's in danger. And so are you if you keep doing this. Let go of the latch. Step away from it. Give me something I can work with down there. Help us put him away so he never comes near your daughter again." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the woman's shoulders sagged. Her fingers slid off the emergency latch. She pulled her hand back like it burned. The girl's lips moved. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he knew that expression. It was the look of a child whispering thank you for something she didn't have the language to explain. Max whined, ears easing just a little. "Riley," Daniel said to the speaker, "she's backed off the latch. We're stable. Where are you?" "Halfway up the tower," came the breathless reply. "I've got harnesses and a tech team with me. We'll reach your cabin first, then we can bridge to hers. Just hold steady." Daniel almost laughed at it. "Not much else I can do from up here." Down at the station, the tall man had realized something was wrong. He took 2 steps backwards, then 3, edging away from the security officers closing in. Glenn, the safety coordinator, appeared behind him, talking into a radio. One of the guards touched the brim of his cap, some kind of silent signal. The man bolted. He shoved past a family, sending a stroller spinning, and sprinted toward the side gate. 2 security guards gave chase, Glenn yelling into his radio. The crowd's murmur became a roar, hundreds of eyes tracking the running figure cutting through the park. Daniel saw it all from above, helpless to join. His jaw clenched. "Don't worry about him yet," he told himself under his breath. "First things first, get her safe." A clank of metal sounded to the right. Daniel turned to see a narrow maintenance walkway jutting out from Tower 2, a metal platform just below our cabin's level. Riley emerged, clipped into a safety line, face pale but determined. Another tech trailed him, carrying extra harness gear. "Afternoon field trip, huh?" Riley called, trying for a shaky grin. "Just another day at work," Daniel replied. Riley reached their gondola and secured it with a secondary line, then extended a locking bar to brace the open door. "Let's get you anchored," he said. "Then you can go play hero next door." In minutes, Daniel had a harness strapped around his chest and thighs, clipped to the safety cable. Max received his own canine rig, a padded center ring with a solid center ring. He accepted it calmly, as if he'd done this sort of thing a dozen times. "Good boy," Daniel murmured. "You ready to go meet her?" Max wagged his tail exactly 1 time. Riley secured the locking device between the 2 cabins, creating a narrow metal bridge for Daniel to cross. It was barely wider than his boots. "You go first," Riley said. "I'll send the dog right behind you on a short lead." Daniel stepped out, feeling the walkway flex under his weight. The space between cabins seemed wider from this angle, the ground much farther away. He fixed his focus on the girl ahead, not on the drop below. She watched with wide, trembling eyes as he moved closer, one hand on the overhead cable, boots steady on the bar. The woman backed herself into the far corner of her cabin, eyes wild but no longer defiant, just exhausted, broken. Max followed, Paws sure, his body low but steady, guided by Riley on the leash. When Daniel finally stepped into the woman's cabin, he felt the tension break like a fever. Up close, the girl looked even smaller, her fear etched into every line of her face. "Hi," he said gently, catching his breath. "My name's Daniel. This is Max. You did everything right up here, you know that?" She swallowed hard. "My name's Ava," she whispered. Max moved forward slowly and pressed his nose softly to her hand. Ava let out a shaky exhale and managed the tiniest smile. The woman slid down the pole to sit on the floor, tears streaming silently. Daniel eased her bag from her grip. "I need to see what he gave you," he said, "so we can stop him from doing this to anyone else." She didn't fight him. In the cramped cabin, Daniel unzipped the worn strap bag and looked inside. On top lay a cheap prepaid phone, taped shut. Beneath it, a folded sheet of paper with names and ages, a ferry ticket for the 6 o'clock crossing, and tucked into a smaller pocket, a neat stack of photographs. Children. Different faces. Different cities. And in the middle of the stack, a slightly older picture of Ava herself, smiling at a school playground she hadn't seen in weeks. Daniel's throat tightened. This wasn't a random crime. It was a system. And Ava's silent signal to a police dog had just cracked it wide open.
Wind pushed against the stalled gondola as Daniel secured Ava into a small safety harness Riley had passed over. Her tiny hands trembled while she clutched Max's fur, burying her face briefly into his neck. Max stayed perfectly still, tail low, ears relaxed in a way that reassured her far better than any words Daniel could offer. "You're safe now," Daniel murmured. "You hear me? We've got you." Ava nodded, though her eyes flicked nervously toward the base station far below. Daniel followed her gaze, and there he was, the tall man in the dark hat. He wasn't running anymore. He stood perfectly still in the middle of the plaza, staring straight up at the gondolas, as if calculating each angle, each second, each possible way this could still go his way. Even from this height, his posture carried something cold, something practiced. He wasn't panicking, he was planning. And that terrified Daniel more than anything. "Riley," Daniel said into the radio, "what's the situation on the ground? Do we have officers covering the exits?" A burst of static, then Riley's strained voice. "Security's chasing him, but he's quick. He ducked into the food court and disappeared into a crowd. They've sealed off some sections, but, officer, this guy moves like he knows every blind spot in the park." Of course he does, Daniel thought. This isn't his first run. The woman, Marla, as she later whispered through tears, pressed for back against the gondola wall, shaking her head at the sight of the man far below. "He's not going to stop. You don't understand what he is. He'll find another way to get her. He always finds a way." Daniel turned to her. "Not today." Max growled softly, head pointed at the shrinking figure on the ground. Ava shrank closer to Daniel. "He hurt the other kids," she whispered, voice barely audible. "He makes them get in cars, or boats, or boxes. He said if we screamed, nobody would hear." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Well, you screamed the only way you could, and Max heard you." Max nudged her gently, and Ava's breathing steadied. Riley's voice crackled through again. "Brooks, we're ready to ferry you across. Manual controls are online. We're going to move your two cabins together slowly until you reach Tower 3. There's a ladder platform there. Stay put, keep everyone anchored." "Copy that," Daniel said. The gondola jerked slightly as the system restarted in manual mode. The two cabins glided toward the next tower platform at a cautious crawl. Ava held the side handle so tightly her knuckles blanched, but Max pressed against her hip, steady and calm, one paw resting over her sneaker. Down below, the man reappeared. This time, he ran.
Daniel watched the dark hat bob and weave through the crowd, barreling past startled parents and scattering a group of teenagers like bowling pins. He aimed straight for the restricted maintenance gate that led under the skylift line. "Riley!" Daniel barked into the radio. "South maintenance gate!" "I see him!" Riley shouted from somewhere below. "Security's closing in!" Daniel's heart pounded. If the man reached the gears or the main cable assembly, he could sabotage the tower or worse, bring down the entire line. He might not escape with Ava, but he could destroy evidence or kill her out of spite. The woman, Marla, as she later whispered through tears, pressed her back against the gondola wall, shaking her head at the sight of the man far below. "He's not going to stop. You don't understand what he is. He'll find another way to get her. He always finds a way." Daniel turned to her. "Not today." Max growled softly, head pointed at the shrinking figure on the ground. Ava shrank closer to Daniel. "He hurt the other kids," she whispered, voice barely audible. "He makes them get in cars, or boats, or boxes. He said if we screamed, nobody would hear." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Well, you screamed the only way you could, and Max heard you." Max nudged her gently, and Ava's breathing steadied. Riley's voice crackled through again. "Brooks, we're ready to ferry you across. Manual controls are online. We're going to move your two cabins together slowly until you reach Tower 3. There's a ladder platform there. Stay put, keep everyone anchored." "Copy that," Daniel said. The gondola jerked slightly as the system restarted in manual mode. The two cabins glided toward the next tower platform at a cautious crawl. Ava held the sign handle so tightly her knuckles blanched, but Max pressed against her hip, steady and calm, one paw resting over her sneaker. Down below, the man reappeared. This time, he ran. Daniel watched the dark hat bob and weave through the crowd, barreling past startled parents and scattering a group of teenagers like bowling pins. He aimed straight for the restricted maintenance gate that led under the skylift line. "Riley!" Daniel barked into the radio. "South maintenance gate!" "I see him!" Riley shouted from somewhere below. "Security's closing in!" Daniel's heart pounded. If the man reached the gears or the main cable assembly, he could sabotage the tower or worse, bring down the entire line. He might not escape with Ava, but he could destroy evidence or kill her out of spite. The gondola reached the tower platform where two ride techs and a pair of officers waited. They secured Daniel's cabin first, then helped ease Ava across the metal walkway, Max glued to her side like a shadow. But Marla, the woman who had taken Ava, remained frozen in her cabin. Daniel stepped back onto the narrow bridge to help her. "Let's go," he said firmly. "This isn't optional." She shook her head. "He'll see me. He'll know I talked. He'll go after my daughter." Daniel tightened his grip on the rail. "Then help me stop him." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the chase began. Her face softened, the fear turning into something almost like relief. She nodded once and stepped onto the walkway, clutching the rail with both hands. They got her across just as the speakers blared a new warning. "All units, suspect entering maintenance structure under Tower 3, approach with caution." Riley swore quietly. "Brooks, he's right under your feet." Max stiffened, nose pointed toward the metal grate beneath them. A guttural growl rumbled through him. Ava clutched his harness. Daniel knelt beside her. "Ava, stay with Officer Harper down the walkway. Don't move until she gets you inside the tower. Max and I need to take care of something." Ava's eyes widened. "He's down there?" "Yes." "Will he come up here?" Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking with quiet certainty. "Not with Max here." Max barked, a deep, commanding sound that echoed off the steel beams. Ava took a shaky breath and nodded, allowing Officer Harper to guide her toward safety. When she disappeared inside the tower stairwell, Daniel exhaled slowly. Then Max surged to the grate, teeth bared, barking downward. Daniel leaned over the metal slats. A shadow moved. The tall man stared up from the catwalk below, a predator caught in the narrowing space between capture and desperation. He tilted his head slowly, like a wolf sizing up prey. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile Daniel had seen once before on a man who had done terrible things and felt nothing for them. A smile full of confidence, cruelty, and calculation. The man lifted a hand. In it was a long bolt cutter. He positioned it around a cable brace. Max barked furiously. "Riley! He's trying to cut the support!" Panic shot through the crew. Officers scrambled inside the tower. Riley thundered down a ladder. Daniel reached for his radio again, but before he could speak, the man snapped the bolt cutter shut. A loud metallic crack rippled through the tower. The whole structure shuddered beneath Daniel. Max lunged against the grate, reacting faster than the humans around him. Daniel steadied himself as the tower swayed. "Brooks!" Riley screamed from below. "He's got a knife! He's heading toward the ladder!" The radio cut off in static. Max barked again, louder than ever, paws scraping at the grate, desperate to get to the man beneath them. Daniel knew what that bark meant. The fight was coming up the tower, and Max wanted to meet it head-on.
The steel tower groaned beneath Daniel's boots as another tremor rippled upward from the lower catwalk. Max lowered his body, muscles tightening like coiled springs, ears pinned forward toward the maintenance ladder below. The dog's bark had changed now, no longer the urgent alarm he used for danger, but the deep, relentless warning of a canine preparing for a confrontation. Daniel forced a steady breath. Easy, boy, not yet. But Max didn't take his eyes off the grate. Below, metal clanged violently. The tall man was climbing, fast. Officers shouted orders from the lower levels, but the tower was a maze of narrow walkways and industrial noise. The echoes swallowed their positions. Every so often, Daniel caught Riley's voice yelling, "He's headed up! Stop him up top!" before it vanished into the hollow iron around them. The man was coming for Ava, or for Marla, or for anyone who threatened his operation. Daniel stepped back from the grate and scanned the platform. Officer Harper had already hustled Ava and Marla inside the tower's protected stairwell, but the door wasn't reinforced. It was just thin sheet metal with a lock. If the man reached them, that flimsy barrier wouldn't slow him more than a heartbeat. Max growled sharply and lunged toward the ladder rail. Daniel moved fast. "Max, here!" The shepherd obeyed instantly, snapping to Daniel's side, but his body vibrated with urgency. His instincts knew what Daniel's training confirmed. They couldn't wait for reinforcements. The tower shook again as the man ascended another level. Daniel grabbed the nearest railing and leaned over. The angle was sharp, the view limited, but he saw movement, dark fabric, the glint of a blade, and the unmistakable silhouette of the hat. The man's voice carried upward in a low, taunting rasp. "Brooks, you think you've won something today?" Daniel froze. He hadn't said his name. No one had. The man knew him. "You've been a problem for us before," the man continued, one gloved hand pulling him higher up the ladder. "Come on up," Daniel said, voice steady. "Let's settle it." The man laughed softly. "Oh, you'll get your chance." Max barked fiercely, the sound ricocheting off the steel beams. Daniel backed up toward the access platform, grabbing a discarded maintenance bar, solid metal, heavy enough to counter a knife if it came to that. His grip tightened around it. A clang rang out as the man reached the next platform. He moved lightly for someone his size, almost too easily, stepping into view with a poise that sent a chill up Daniel's spine. His hat cast a shadow over sharp, calculating eyes.
The bolt cutters dangled from his belt. In his hand, he held a long, serrated utility knife. "Officer Brooks," he said, his voice a calm whisper that somehow carried through the wind. "I've heard a lot about you." Max stepped forward, hackles raised. He smirked. "And your dog, impressive. He nearly cost us a shipment last spring." Daniel's heart hammered. Spring. A missing child case in Bellevue. The one that kept him awake for weeks afterwards. A van that vanished into thin air. A scent Max had followed for hours until it disappeared near the docks. This was him. Finally in the open. Daniel raised the metal bar. "Drop the knife. Put your hands where I can see them." The man didn't flinch. "You're not going to do that. Not with 2 children depending on you." He tilted his head. "One of them yours, isn't it?" Daniel froze. Max snarled, a deep, dangerous rumble. The man chuckled. "Saw the look on your face when she cried. You're predictable. That's what makes this fun." He stepped forward. Daniel tightened his stance. "You're not getting past me." "Oh, I wasn't planning to." He lunged. Daniel swung the bar, connecting with the man's wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, skidding toward the edge of the tower. Max launched himself at the man, but the attacker twisted with frightening agility, slamming his elbow into Max's side and knocking him back a step. Not enough to injure, enough to enrage. Max sprang again, teeth bared, but Daniel commanded sharply, "Max, back!" Max froze mid-stride, responding with trained perfection. He growled low but held position. The man laughed. "Such a good soldier. He listens even when he shouldn't." Daniel swung the bar again, but the man sidestepped, grabbed the rail and kicked Daniel's shin with brutal precision. Pain shot up Daniel's leg, forcing him to one knee. The man moved to grab the fallen knife. Max intercepted. Like a bullet, Max barreled into the man's forearm, knocking the attacker off balance and shoving him into the tower railing. The man grabbed the bar to keep from falling. "You mutt," he spat, swinging the bolt cutters at Max's head. Daniel dove, tackling the arm. The blow missed Max by inches. The tower groaned again, another strain from the earlier cable damage. "Riley, we need this tower cleared, now!" A distant, "Working on it," echoed up the scaffolding. Max circled, growling, teeth ready. The man recovered quickly, using the tower structure to spring upward. He leapt to the next level, far more agile than Daniel anticipated, and landed beside the stairwell door Harper had taken Ava through. "No!" Daniel scrambled to his feet. The man reached the door handle. He pulled, and Max launched. The dog's full weight slammed the attacker sideways, knocking him across the narrow platform. The man hit the railing hard, nearly flipping over the edge. He grabbed the bar at the last second, fingers straining. Down below, screams erupted from the crowd as they watched the struggle high above their heads. Daniel moved toward him cautiously. "Give up. It's over." The man's hat slipped off, tumbling down the tower. His eyes were full of pure, seething hate. "You have no idea what's coming," he hissed. Daniel reached for his cuffs. The man released the railing. On purpose. He fell. Not a straight drop. His body slammed into a lower girder, then another, ricocheting down the framework before disappearing from view. Max whimpered, pacing the edge, unsure whether the fight was finished or changing shape. Riley's voice burst onto the radio. "Brooks, he's down! He landed on the lower catwalk. Med team is moving in. He's alive, but barely. Officers are cuffing him now." Daniel exhaled shakily. Max pressed his head against Daniel's leg. "It's okay, buddy. You did it. You saved them all. But before relief could settle, the stairwell door creaked open. Ava peeked out, eyes wide, face blotchy from crying. "Is he gone?" she whispered. Daniel knelt, spreading his arms. Max reached her first, placing his head gently under her hand. Ava dropped to her knees and hugged him tight, sobbing into his fur. Daniel closed his eyes. One more chapter, and we get these kids home.
The tower felt strangely quiet once Ava's sobs faded into hiccups and the radios stopped crackling with panic. The man in the hat was down, cuffed, and on his way to an ambulance under heavy guard. The skylift line was empty now, cabins frozen in place while maintenance crews inspected every bolt. The amusement park music had been cut, leaving only the distant hum of generators and the murmur of hundreds of shaken visitors being slowly guided toward the exits. Max stayed pressed against Ava's side as they made their way down the enclosed stairwell inside the tower. She clung to his harness like a lifeline, her small fingers wrapped tight in the coarse fur at his shoulder. Every so often she'd glance up at Daniel, as if checking he was still there, that this wasn't another trick. At the base of the tower, paramedics checked her over. No visible injuries, just exhaustion, dehydration, and fear that had settled deep in her bones. The little boy from the funhouse sat nearby, wrapped in a thin blanket, eating crackers slowly while a nurse talked to him in gentle tones. When he saw Ava, he gave a shy wave. Ava managed a faint smile. Marla sat farther off to the side, hands now cuffed in front of her, an officer standing nearby. Her face was streaked with dried mascara and regret. She watched Ava with the hollow eyes of a woman who had finally realized how close she'd come to destroying someone else's child to save her own. Daniel stepped over and crouched in front of her. "We're running his prints and the data from that phone," he said quietly. "If you want any chance at leniency, you cooperate, completely. No half-truths, no missing names." Marla nodded, voice rough. "I will. I know where some of the drop points are. Not all, but enough. He didn't trust me with everything, but I know about tonight." "Tonight?" She swallowed. "The boat. 6 o'clock was just one transfer. There's a warehouse by the river where they keep them first. Kids that don't have families nearby. Kids they think no one will miss for a while. He said if anything went wrong here, they'd move the rest sooner." Daniel felt that familiar cold settle over him again. "How many?" "I don't know," she whispered. 4? 5? More?" She closed her eyes. They weren't allowed to talk to each other. Behind them, Max gave a low growl, as if even he understood the weight of that. By dusk, Riverside Police Headquarters buzzed like a hornet's nest. The sun slipped low behind the buildings, painting the sky in orange and pink, while officers clustered in briefing rooms, radios clipped and vests fastened. On the operations board, a digital map showed the river's edge, a blinking dot marking the old warehouse Marla had described. The phone from Marla's bag lay on the table, its casing pried open. Digital forensics had scraped enough from it to confirm what she'd said. Coded messages, GPS pings, contact records with numbers tied to missing child reports in 3 different states. A name now sat on the board under the words "primary suspect," Marcus Hale. Daniel stared at that for a long moment. The missing case in Bellevue, the van that vanished, the trail that had ended at a dock with no witnesses. That file had kept him awake more nights than he could count. Max nudged his hand, drawing him back to the present. The dog's eyes were clear, focused. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "I know. We've got a shot to stop him properly this time." The raid on the warehouse came together fast. Patrol units sealed surrounding streets while plainclothes officers took positions along the riverbank. The air smelled of diesel and damp wood. Shadows from the old brick buildings stretched long across the cracked asphalt. Daniel tightened Max's vest, checking the clips by habit. "You ready, partner?" Max gave a small huff and lifted his head toward the warehouse door. Inside, the building was cooler, the air heavy with dust and the faint odor of mold. The only light came from small barred windows high above and the occasional beam from a flashlight. Footsteps thudded softly over concrete as officers spread out in formation. Max led the way. He moved with that same quiet precision he'd shown in the park, nose low, reading the invisible map of sense and fear in the air. He passed old pallets, empty crates, abandoned tools. Then, suddenly, he stopped, ears snapping forward. A whimper floated from somewhere ahead. Then another. Children's voices. Daniel's grip tightened on the leash. "We've got them," he called softly. "Left side, past the support beam." They rounded a corner and saw a metal door, padlocked from the outside. Faint scratching sounded from behind it. Max pawed at the crack, barking once, sharp and insistent. "Police!" Daniel called. "Stand back from the door." A muffled sob came from inside, followed by a tiny voice. Please let us out." It didn't take long to cut the lock. The door swung open with a grating squeal. Inside, under the dim light of a single bulb, 5 children sat huddled on thin mattresses, eyes wide, cheeks streaked, clothes rumpled. One boy shielded a younger girl with his arms. Another clutched a worn stuffed rabbit so tight its ear was nearly torn off. For a moment, no one moved. Then Max stepped in slowly, tail low in reassurance, sniffing each child gently. The little girl reached out and grabbed onto his neck like he was the only solid thing in the world. "You're safe," Daniel said, voice catching slightly. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." That night stretched long. Statements, medical checks, calls to agencies in other states. Parents notified, some sobbing so hard they could barely speak, some simply whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Marcus Hale, in guarded hospital custody, refused to talk. But his files and Marla's testimony began to unravel the wider network piece by piece. By dawn, the city was quieter. Riverside Amusement Park sat closed and still, rides motionless against the pale sky. At the station, the harsh fluorescent light had softened with the early glow, pushing in through high windows. The chaos had finally slowed enough for the human moments to come through. Daniel stood just outside the main lobby, Max at his side, watching as a sedan pulled into the lot. A man and woman stepped out, eyes rimmed red, faces drawn tight from days of fear and almost no sleep. When the station doors opened, Ava stood waiting between 2 social workers, her small hand resting on Max's head. She saw them. "Mom! Dad!" She ran. They dropped to their knees, gathering her into their arms, the 3 of them clinging together in a knot of relief and tears that even seasoned officers looked away for a moment to compose themselves. Max sat quietly beside Daniel, watching, tail giving one gentle swipe along the floor. Ava pulled back just long enough to run to him one more time. She reached into her pocket and brought out something small, a simple plastic bracelet, the kind kids trade at school.
bright purple with her real name spelled out in tiny white beads. "You keep this," she told him, clipping it carefully to his harness, "so you don't forget me." Max blinked slowly, leaning his head into her chest as if he understood every word. Daniel cleared his throat softly. "I don't think he'll forget," he said. "You're part of his story now." Ava smiled, a real smile this time, not the frightened, shaky one he'd seen in the gondola. Then she hugged Max tight, whispered "thank you," and went back to her parents. They walked out together into the morning light, the kind of sunrise that felt like a promise. Later, as the station settled into a quieter rhythm, Daniel sat on the front steps with a cup of lukewarm coffee. Max lay beside him, head on his paws, eyes half closed but still alert in that way only working dogs could manage. Daniel glanced down at the little bracelet on Max's harness. "You know," he said softly, "if I hadn't listened to you in that crowd, if you hadn't listened to her, we might have walked right past." Max's ears twitched. Inside the building, someone called his name and mentioned that federal agents had already flagged files from Hale's phone, names, routes, money transfers. The network was bigger than they'd hoped, smaller than they'd feared, but it wasn't gone yet.
There would be more work, more nights, more scars. Daniel looked out at the empty parking lot, then back at his partner. "We didn't end it today," he murmured, "but we ended it for her, and for those kids in that warehouse. That matters." Max shifted closer and rested his head against Daniel's leg. Above them, the sky brightened, the last of the night shadows fading from the edges of the lot. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed and then quieted. A new day had begun. Sometimes heroes didn't stop every evil thing in the world. Sometimes they stopped one. Sometimes they listened when a frightened child high above a crowded park gave a silent signal no one else understood. And sometimes that was enough to change a life forever.